Hello everyone. Today I want to talk a little bit about free speech. Um, this is more reflection of my thoughts on it, um, and I hope that maybe to some people it might be to a certain degree insightful. We live in a time where free speech seems to be a contested issue. There is people who feel that they cannot say what they want to say or what they're thinking, and are afraid that they will have to face repression in a way. There also is people who say that certain things should not be allowed to be said, so that kind of would match the other side's opinion, and this makes it necessary to really think about what is free speech, what should it be, and how do we deal with the complications around it. Personally, I feel that free speech should be one of the highest values in general, but for sure in any liberal democracy, and that it should be allowed for people to voice their opinions, and also that it should not be restricted in any way, or that people should have to face punishment because of statements they make using their right to free speech. I also understand that some things that people say might hurt other people. But I think that still people should be allowed to say it, because it's often not necessarily clear that certain things will hurt other people. There is another discussion about like slander or about insulting other people. I'm not sure that this should be a legal discussion, but it's more a discussion of, manners in a way. There is another line if, for example, you incite someone to violence or to committing any kind of crime. Arguably, you have left the domain of free speech and are in another domain where you will probably have to face some punishment. Now, there is cases where those things are quite clear, but as always, the problems arise in the areas where things aren't quite as clear, where we're not in an easy black and white area, but where we actually have to look at the different opinions about it, and we realize that people can strongly differ on what they think about this subject. I think, as I said before, that people should be allowed to say more or less whatever they want, as long as they're not directly hurting someone by saying this. And by directly hurting, I mean directly lead to some physical harm or very strong mental harm. But I also think that this has to mean that anyone can also voice an opposite opinion. The right to free speech does not include the right of being agreed with. So if someone says something which I find is wrong, then I want them to be able to say it, but I will also tell them that they're wrong, in my opinion. And this is actually the base of any serious discussion. Actually, if you just look at the history of thinking, of science, of philosophy, theology, whatever, you will see that actually a lot of it is discussions between people. There were times when those intellectuals basically did it by books. Someone would have an opinion in a book and someone else would kind of write a book to disprove them, to argue with them. And this is kind of the high-minded way of having a discussion, which you can have just with any person. Today, with the internet and social media, this can become very fast. It's kind of, you see something you can answer directly. And in the old way, people had a bit more time to reflect on things, so probably they didn't get quite as emotionally quite as fast. And I think in many cases people are complaining about, complaining that they cannot say everything. They probably are, some of them at least, are complaining about saying something and then someone disagreeing with them. Actually, disagreement is the way, or at least one way, to improve what you think about something. A good discussion is something which helps people to be confronted with new ideas, to have to really think through their ideas, to really voice them out. And often I've made the experience that the discussion I'm having will also change my opinion to a certain degree. Often it's not like a 180-degree turn, though this can also happen if I realize I'm completely wrong. Often it's more about realizing that you're not right about all the nuances, or you didn't take everything into account, and that you have to modify your opinion in some way. So this is one reason why personally I feel free speech and even more of free discussions are extremely important, because they are a way to widen your understanding. And even if it's if you're discussing with someone who more or less obviously, or to you at least, more or less obviously is wrong, it's still good to try and understand other opinions, because it will also force you to be able to really describe your opinion and voice it, not just share an opinion because some other people that you like do share it, but actually understand what is the nature of the opinion. So there's an incredible power in free discussions, and free discussions can only exist if there is free speech. As I said, there is an argument to be had to say that certain kinds of insults or certain dangerous statements should be in some way limited. There's the important example, I think it was from the US Supreme Court, where it basically stated if someone is shouting fire in a full theater and there is no fire, then this is not free speech, because actually it can cause a panic and put people at risk. And so even in the United States, which have a very strong tradition of free speech, there is an understanding that there is statements which, even though they are speech, they are not free speech in the sense that they are not there to discuss ideas and formulate ideas, which is why we need free speech, but which is basically just, putting people in danger in this example. As I said, there's clear examples and there's gray areas where it's not so clear, but it shows that free speech is a bit more complicated to see when are we having free speech and how should we have it. There is another aspect in the modern discussion about free speech, which is that a lot of it is happening online and a lot of it is happening on different platforms. And there have been cases where those platforms decide to limit what people should put out, and they block certain posts. In some cases, they have even thrown people off those platforms, and there is a complaint that this is limiting their free speech. Well, from a technical, legal point of view, free speech is something which is usually guaranteed in a way that the state or a government should not limit the free speech of its citizens. In many cases, those platforms are actually enterprises, they're companies, so they're not part of the government, which gives them actually more rights how to decide who to pick out, who to allow on their platform, how to limit what people are supposed to put out there. And this, of course, also gives the risk that those companies can be influenced, that there can be campaigns to throw certain people out, that you can kind of, again, slander people by claiming that certain posts of theirs are in a category which this company says we do not accept. And this also leads to many discussions. Personally, again, I believe that people should be allowed to state what they think. There is another deeper question here. The question, why are we actually using those private companies as basically defining our public squares? And this is something which has developed over the last decades. And personally, I feel the more interesting question to be had would be if we do not need to redefine public spaces and the extensions of right to public spaces, and if this might mean regulating them if they are run by companies, or creating alternatives by the state, or other things you can imagine. And I feel this is actually a more interesting discussion, because to really expand the free speech rights also to the whole virtual world, you basically need to make companies accountable to it, which means that in a way you extend government stronger into them, either, as said, by regulation, or maybe in an extreme case even privatization, or creating government run alternatives. This is not often discussed, and you may wonder why. Of course, we all use those platforms because they're convenient, they're usually good quality, and in most cases they work and they do not limit what we say. In some cases they might, and at the moment, as the legal situation is, that's actually fully within their rights. So if someone says I'm not allowed to put out everything on a certain platform that I want to put out, then in principle you have the option to put it out on another channel, which of course in reality means that you will reach much less people, and that's why you don't want to do it. And this is kind of the problem that you're facing. So you're not so much limited in your ability to say whatever you want, but you're limited in reaching a lot of people with what you want to say. Of course, when the whole concept of free speech was designed, this was basically true for everyone. If you wanted to reach a lot of people, well, you could write a book, but there's always a certain level of luck on how many people will listen to it. Could go out on the streets and start talking, but there was just a limited number of people who would see it. This all changed over time, and at some point you had a certain number of people who were present in the media and could reach a lot of people, and now through those through the new technical possibilities that we have, in theory everyone who, just like me, has a camera can put a video out, and in theory can be watched by many people. In practice, most people still have very few people who actually follow them. But even if there's just 100 people who see a post of yours on some platform, it's still much more than normally you would reach with whatever you say in your free speech. Which of course also means there's more people who might be insulted by it. And this kind of causes the whole discussion. Some people saying you shouldn't be allowed to say it. Or some people saying you're wrong, and if I put something out and there's 20 people who think I'm wrong and they all say, oh, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, then I might feel like, oh, I can't say what I want to say because people are limiting me. What do we do about it? Frankly, I'm not sure. But I think a big part of it is that we have to think about how we deal with things. That we as people, that every one of us as a person has to kind of reflect on how do I deal with this. Can I accept that someone has a different opinion? Can I invite people to share why they think I'm saying something wrong? So we need to improve ourselves to improve the discussion. So this is hard because we do not like to have someone not agree with us. We do not like someone to say that we're wrong. We do not like to see someone we don't agree with, and then we might call for them to be silenced, even though they're probably not really causing harm. It's just an opinion I don't like. Well, what's the answer? I don't have a perfect answer. Can just try to deal as best as with things as I can myself, and hopefully other people will do the same. And over time, we'll probably learn to deal with this, and some of the problems we have now will probably become less. It also means not listening to everyone who shouts and not believing that just because someone is loud that they speak for the majority or just that they know what they're talking about even. Realizing that actually reflected thoughts are more complicated but also more likely to be correct. Learning to ignore some things which would upset us. Well, I think this is something which demands much more thought, much more reflections, not just by one person but by everyone. So please share your thoughts on this with me. Share them with everyone else. I think this is a discussion which is probably more important than some of the other things people discuss about on the internet. Probably more important than many of the things people discuss about on the internet. But it's a discussion which seems not to be had that often. So this time it was a bit more reflective, maybe not as with such clear ideas or opinions as my other videos, but I still think it's an important subject, and I hope that maybe I can give you some inspiration to do your own thinking about it. I think that's enough for today. As always, if you enjoy my videos, please like them, share them, subscribe to my channel. Feel free to give me feedback, what you enjoy about my videos, what you do not enjoy. And hopefully until next time, I hope you are all well. I wish you the best, and see you soon.